What happens when an elderly woman, grieving her husband and ignored in her own home, decides to stop staying silent? What began with skipping a shower turned into a personal revolution. And what happened next left everyone speechless. You want to know the moment I realized I was no longer part of the house? It was over a bar of soap. Yes, soap. One day, I'm a wife, a mother, a grandmother. The next, I'm just an old woman using too much water. Let me start from the beginning. I'm Margaret Ann Keller, 70 years old, full of stories, some arthritis, and a hell of a lot more sense than people give me credit for. I've always been the good one. You know the type. The one who bakes cookies for the neighbors, says thank you too often, and still folds fitted sheets. That's me. 2 years ago, my husband of 42 years, Frank, passed away. I cried for 3 months straight, and then decided to live. Not just survive. So when my son Ben and his charming wife Kate asked if they could temporarily move in with me while they figured things out, I said yes. Big mistake. At first, it felt like family. Laughter in the kitchen, movie nights, little notes on the fridge. And then, everything turned. The change started slow, like milk going sour a day at a time. Kate began rearranging things, not just furniture, but routines, dynamics. "Oh, Margaret, don't bother making breakfast. We do smoothies now," she chirped one morning. Smoothies? They replaced my eggs and bacon with cold green sludge in jars. Ben, my sweet boy, or so I thought, became distant. Always working, always on edge, snapping at the smallest things. "Mom, could you please not use the washer during the day? It messes with our Wi-Fi." The Wi-Fi? God forbid my clean underwear delay his spreadsheets. But the real turning point? The fall. I slipped in the shower. Just a minor bruise on my hip, but it shook me. I mentioned it over dinner. Thought it was worth sharing. Ben didn't look up from his phone. Kate said, "Maybe you shouldn't shower so often. You know, at your age, skin gets dry. Less is more." I laughed. I thought it was a joke. It wasn't. 2 days later, I found a note on the bathroom door. "Please limit showers to once every 2 to 3 days. Hot water is expensive." I stood there, reading it again and again, like it was some ancient riddle. Expensive? What next? Charging me rent in my own house? Here's what's funny. I did stop. Not because of the water bill, not because I agreed, but because something in me snapped. You ever feel like the air around you stops being yours? Like you're breathing on borrowed time and borrowed space? I felt unwanted, like a guest who'd overstayed her welcome. Only I wasn't a guest. It was my house. And then came the whispers. The not-so-subtle hints. "Do you smell something?" Kate asked Ben one evening, deliberately loud enough for me to hear. "I think it's the old carpet," Ben replied, shooting me a quick glance. Right, the carpet. Sure, but I didn't confront them. Not yet. Instead, I began counting. Days without a real shower, 1, 3, 5, 11. My dignity, peeling off layer by layer, like old wallpaper. It wasn't just the hygiene, it was the erasure. Slowly, Kate began removing traces of me from the house. My needlepoint pillows? Too dusty. The family photo wall? We want a minimalist look. Even my rose-scented hand soap vanished, replaced by unscented antibacterial foam. Because God forbid the house smells like a woman who loved roses. I tried to fight back. I cooked. I cleaned. I offered to babysit their future imaginary children. A bribe, essentially. But nothing I did was ever enough. "You don't need to do all that," Kate said with a tight smile. "Just enjoy your golden years." Golden years. What a crock of shit. Sorry. No swearing, I know. Let me rephrase. What a steaming pile of sugar-coated nonsense. These weren't golden years. These were ghost years. I was becoming invisible in my own home. One Sunday, they had friends over. I wasn't invited. I wasn't even acknowledged. They laughed in the living room while I sat in the kitchen, pretending to read the same page of a novel I couldn't focus on. At one point, I walked into the room to grab my reading glasses and heard Kate say, "She just doesn't take care of herself anymore. I mean, it's kind of sad." Sad? I held onto the door frame. Not for support, to keep myself from breaking every glass in that godforsaken room, but instead, I smiled and said nothing. Because that's what women like me are taught to do. We don't explode. We absorb. We understand. We vanish with grace. Not anymore. That night, I took a long, hot shower. I let the water run like I was paying for it with someone else's credit card. I scrubbed until my skin was pink and steaming. And when I stepped out, I stared at myself in the mirror for a long time. There I was, Margaret Ann Keller, still standing. And then I did something I hadn't done in months. I walked into the kitchen, sat at the table, and said out loud, "Tomorrow, I'm making breakfast. Real breakfast. Eggs, bacon. The kind that makes the whole damn house smell like memories." Kate froze. Ben blinked. No one said a word. But I wasn't asking for permission. What happened next changed everything. You won't want to miss how this quiet rebellion turned into something far bigger. Stick around. It's just getting started. They didn't say a word. After I declared I'd be making breakfast, Ben looked at Kate. Kate looked at the floor. And me? I just looked at the bacon in my mind. Crispy, unapologetic, real. The next morning, I woke up at 6:30. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I cracked eggs like I was cracking expectations, sizzled bacon like a battle hymn, toasted bread and buttered it with a vengeance. The house started to smell like it used to smell when Frank was alive. Like warmth, comfort, and unapologetic cholesterol. Kate came down in yoga pants and a disapproving face. "Didn't we say we were cutting back on grease?" "No, you said that." I said, "Pass the salt." She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Maybe I had. One that didn't take shit anymore. Ben followed, rubbing his eyes. "What's going on?" "Breakfast," I said, sliding a plate in front of him. "With flavor. Remember that?" He blinked at the plate like it was an alien artifact. Kate just scoffed and walked away. Ben, bless his conflicted heart, actually took a bite. Then another. And then the bastard said, "It's really good, Mom." I smiled. "Of course it is. It's made by a woman who knows how to season and survive. But don't think for a second that one plate of bacon fixed things. Oh no, that was just me lighting the match. The real fire? That came next. Over the next few days, I started reclaiming space. I moved my sewing basket back into the living room, the one Kate had tried to hide in the garage, to clear clutter. I placed my framed photo of Frank right on the mantel, next to their minimalist black and white wedding picture. It didn't match. That was the point. Kate responded by giving me subtle lectures. I read this article about aging with grace, letting go of old habits. I read one too, I replied. It said passive-aggressive behavior is a cry for help. She didn't laugh. I did. But the real punch came a few days later, when Kate cornered me in the hallway like we were in some suburban standoff. "Margaret, we need to talk." Ah, the classic line. Nothing good has ever followed those words. "I've noticed," she said, "that you've been asserting yourself more. That's great, but it's creating a bit of friction in the household." "Friction?" I raised an eyebrow. "Honey, I've been sandpapered since the day you moved in." She didn't smile. "Of course not. We're just trying to maintain a peaceful environment. And it's hard when, well, things start to feel tense." "You mean when I stopped being invisible?" Silence. Sweet, awkward silence. Then she dropped it. The line. The one I'd been waiting for. "Maybe it's time to consider other living arrangements." Boom! There it was. The eviction masked in politeness. The sanitized slap in the face. I stared at her. My heart didn't race. My blood didn't boil. It settled. Cold, calm, crystal clear. "You want me out of my own house?" "No, no," she backpedaled. "Just maybe you'd be happier in a retirement community. You know, people your age, activities, structure." What she meant was, "You're a burden. You're inconvenient. You don't fit the Instagram aesthetic." "Well," I said slowly, "thank you for your suggestion. I'll think about it. Right after I install a deadbolt on my bedroom door and change the Wi-Fi password." You should have seen her face. Priceless. That night, I lay awake, not with fear, but with clarity. They wanted me small, quiet, compliant. But I wasn't built for that. Not anymore. The next morning, I did something wild. I dressed up. Makeup, jewelry. That blue silk blouse Frank always said made me look like I still had stories left to live. Then I walked to the community center and signed up for the weekly speaker series. They were short on volunteers, so guess who now organizes the Wisdom Wednesdays talks? You're looking at her. I gave my first presentation that week. Title: How to Survive Passive Aggression Without Committing a Crime. The room erupted in laughter. Real, honest, belly laughter. And for the first time in a long while, I felt seen. Not tolerated. Not endured. Seen. After the talk, a woman named Dolores came up to me. Red lipstick, cane, fire in her eyes. "You're not invisible," she said. "You're electric." And just like that, I had allies. Every Wednesday, I told another story, each one laced with sarcasm, sorrow, wisdom, and rebellion. The crowd grew. So did I. Kate and Ben noticed. I started coming home later, started hosting coffee meetups in my kitchen, started playing old jazz in the living room on Sunday mornings, loud enough to shake the blinds. One morning, I walked in on Kate talking to Ben. "She's different lately." "Yeah," he said, "happier. And it's disruptive. Or maybe," Ben said, "it's inspiring." I stood in the doorway. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Because here's the thing. When you stop shrinking yourself to make others comfortable, they either grow with you or move the hell out of your way. This is the turning point. Everything you've been waiting for. It starts here. In part 3, someone crosses a line, and I have no choice but to strike back. Stay with me. You do not want to miss what happens next. So, here's the thing about pushing a woman like me too far. We don't scream. We don't throw dishes. We don't key your car or slash your tires. No, we get clever. After a few weeks of Wisdom Wednesdays, coffee clatches in my kitchen, and jazz-fueled Sunday mornings, the air in the house started to shift. Kate didn't say much anymore, just pursed her lips every time she saw me in heels. Ben? He started greeting me with, "You look sharp today, Mom." I appreciated that, even if it felt half apologetic. But don't get cozy. You'd think this is the part where everything starts getting better. Oh no. This is the part where the war goes cold. It started with the laundry. I came downstairs one morning and found a sticky note on the washing machine. "Please avoid using fabric softener. It's overpowering." Overpowering. Unlike the passive-aggressive fog you're putting out, huh, Kate? Fine. No softener. I tossed the note in the trash and washed my clothes in the scent of defiance. Then the Wi-Fi mysteriously stopped working in my room. I asked Ben. He said it must be a router thing. Kate, meanwhile, smiled a little too long over her tea. That same week, my favorite chair, the one I've had since Reagan was in office, disappeared. Just vanished from the living room. I found it in the garage, under a drop cloth, with a box labeled donation. When I asked about it, Kate shrugged. "Oh, I thought you weren't using it." "You thought wrong." I dragged it back inside, loudly, over the hardwood, and placed it exactly where it used to be. The next day it was back in the garage, so I nailed a note to it. "Not dead yet." I put the chair in the living room again, sat in it like I was royalty. Kate didn't say a word, but her eye twitched. I counted that as a win. Still, she had one more card to play. It was a Friday. I came home from my talk at the center, where I'd just delivered a rousing speech called "How to Tell If Your Daughter-in-Law is Gaslighting You in 3 Easy Steps," and found my bedroom door open. Odd. I always kept it closed. Inside, everything looked normal until I opened my dresser. My lavender soap bars? Gone. My journal? Moved. And then I saw it. The gift bag, sitting on my bed like a ticking bomb wrapped in ribbon. Inside was a pamphlet, Elder Care Living Communities, where compassion meets comfort. Also included an info packet, a free lunch voucher, and a handwritten note from Kate. "Just exploring options for the future. We love you and want the best for you." My hands trembled, not with fear, with fury. This wasn't subtle anymore. This was a message. Clear, condescending, and final. "You don't belong here." I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I sat in my chair, my not dead yet chair. And I thought. And then I acted. I waited until Saturday. I made a pot of my strongest coffee, put on my sharpest suit, navy, pinstripe, shoulder pads like armor, and invited some of the ladies from the center over. Dolores, Irene, Gladys, all loud, all sassy, all retired and tired of everyone's nonsense. We held our monthly book club, only this time we held it in the living room, with Kate there. She tried to pretend it was fine, sipped her chamomile tea like she wasn't surrounded by revolution. Until Dolores, God bless her blunt soul, turned to Kate and said, "So, how's it feel living in her house?" Kate blinked. "Excuse me?" Dolores didn't flinch. "You heard me, sweetheart. Your guest's here, right? Seems like Margaret's been carrying the energy of this place while you've been rearranging." The other ladies murmured agreement. Kate turned red, left the room. Ben apologized to me later, said Kate had been stressed, that they didn't mean to push me out. I nodded, smiled, and gave him my final move. I handed him a letter, already signed, already notarized. I was putting the house in a living trust. With one clause, they could stay only as long as I allowed it. His eyes widened. "Mom." "I'm not moving out," I said quietly. "You are. You two have 30 days. Ben looked like I'd just slapped him with a frozen salmon. "Where will we go?" "That's the beauty of being adults," I said. "You figure it out." Kate didn't speak to me for days after that. Fine by me. The silence was the best parting gift she ever gave me. They packed quickly, left behind the smoothie blender and a plant that was already dying. Fitting. The morning they left, I watched from my chair. My chair, in my house, with sunlight spilling across the floor like it was finally free to visit again. As their car pulled out, I exhaled something I didn't know I'd been holding in for months. Ownership, breath, identity. And then, for the first time in what felt like forever, I took a long, hot, unapologetic shower. I used lavender soap. Let the scent fill every inch of the room. Let it cling to the walls, the towels, my skin. I stayed under the water until it ran cold. And still, I didn't want to leave, because I wasn't just washing off sweat. I was rinsing off silence. You think this was the end? Think again. In part 4, I get a call from someone unexpected, and what they ask of me flips my world upside down. You'll want to see what I do next. You'd think kicking your own son and his unbearable wife out of your house would be the end of it. And in some ways, it was. The end of being quiet. The end of apologizing for existing. The end of shrinking into corners and letting others redecorate your identity. But what came next wasn't silence. It was something louder. 3 weeks after Ben and Kate left, just as the peace was finally starting to feel permanent, I got a phone call. From a number I didn't recognize. I was about to let it go to voicemail, like most calls from unknowns, but something in my gut said, "Pick up." "Hello?" There was a pause, then a quiet, shaky voice. "Mom?" I sat up. It wasn't Ben. It was Amy. Amy was my daughter, the one who hadn't spoken to me in almost 6 years. Not since the fight. Not since she'd moved to Oregon with that backpacking, kombucha-brewing healer she married, and later divorced. I felt something catch in my throat. A pause too long to be casual. "Amy," I whispered. I didn't know if I should call." "You should have." "I heard about what happened. Ben told me. I guess I don't know, Mom. I didn't realize you were going through all that." I let the silence linger. Not to punish her, but to let her hear the years she'd missed. "I'm sorry," she finally said. I didn't say, "It's okay," because it wasn't. But I said, "I'm glad you called." And that was enough. We talked for 2 hours. Turns out, she'd left Oregon. Gotten a job with a nonprofit in Denver. She was living alone, working with women over 60 who'd been displaced, forgotten, or pushed aside by their families or the system. "Sounds familiar," I said, half laughing. "I know," she replied. "That's why I'm calling." She took a breath. "I was wondering if you'd want to come out here. Talk to the women. Just share your story. You've always been good with words." I blinked. "You want me to speak? Like, publicly?" She laughed. "Mom, you've been doing that every Wednesday already, haven't you?" Touché. So I said yes. 2 weeks later, I was on a flight for the first time in years, wearing a blazer that made me feel like I owned stock in a legacy I hadn't even built yet. Denver was cold and bright. The air tasted different. Amy picked me up from the airport. She hugged me for a long time. We didn't say much. Didn't need to. The community center was small but full. 40-some women in folding chairs, waiting for me to speak. I looked at them, some with walkers, some with lipstick, all of them with that same flicker I'd seen in the mirror after my first long shower. A flicker that said, "I'm still here." I took the mic. "My name is Margaret Ann Keller. I'm 70 years old, and I've recently rediscovered that I'm not just a woman who used to matter. I'm a woman who still does." That was how I started. What followed was raw, hilarious, heartbreaking, and, apparently, powerful. They laughed, they cried, they stood when I finished. One woman hugged me so hard my glasses fogged up. Amy was watching from the back. Later, she took me to dinner. Over soup and too much bread, she said, "I'm proud of you." I almost cried into my chowder. "You know," I told her, "I used to think the worst part of aging was being invisible." She nodded. "But it's not. The worst part is being told you should be." We sat in silence for a bit. Not awkward. Just full. The next morning, she offered me a part-time gig, speaking once a month at the center, helping the women craft their own stories. I didn't say yes right away. I wanted to think. When I returned home to Florida, the house felt different, not quieter, freer. I opened the windows. I filled the kitchen with jazz. I baked cookies just because. I started a small blog, not dead yet, where I posted little essays and photos of my front porch garden, now blooming again after years of being ignored. It caught on. Turns out, a lot of people wanted to hear from a woman who wasn't ready to fade. I got emails, comments, even interview requests, and somewhere along the way, the house stopped being the place I was stuck in and started being the home I chose again. People started stopping me at the grocery store. "You're the lavender lady, right? From the blog?" "Yes. Yes, I am, and I still shower daily. Thank you very much." Final note, a message from Margaret. If you're reading this and you're older, whether that's 50 or 90, and you've been made to feel like you're in the way, hear me loud and clear. You are not a burden. You are not outdated. You are not invisible. You are a damn hurricane with a heartbeat. Stop asking permission to exist. Start taking up space again. If this story stirred something in you, don't keep it quiet. Share it. Send it to someone who needs to be reminded they still matter. This isn't just Margaret's story. It's ours. And it's only just beginning.